I was never the type to get involved in my neighbor's business. Back when we first moved into Elkwood Hills, a small and quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Richmond, my wife and I were just grateful for some peace and space after years of cramped apartment living. We'd picked house number 17 on Briar Hollow Lane, a modest two-story with pale blue shutters and a weeping cherry tree in the front yard. A dream, really. At the time, we thought the hardest thing we'd deal with would be mosquitoes or mowing the lawn in July. That was 5 years ago, before everything changed. Before the house next door became something I dreaded looking at. Before I started questioning everything about my neighbor, Tom Grayson. Tom and his wife Marlene lived in the house to our right, number 19. They were already there when we moved in, and Tom was quick to introduce himself. Early 50s, clean-shaven, polite to the point of being overly formal. Always wore button-ups and khakis, even on weekends. He looked more like a private school principal than a neighbor. A couple weeks after we moved in, Tom knocked on our door holding a plate of brownies and a sad smile. He told us about their son Jacob, who had gone missing 2 weeks prior. 14 years old, smart, bright kid. Gone without a trace. The police were involved. It was on the local news. They were doing everything they could. Marlene stood a few feet behind him on our walkway, arms folded across her chest. She didn't say a word. We offered to help, of course. I even put up some flyers near the high school and community park. But weeks passed, then months. No Jacob, no news. Eventually, things grew quieter. The posters came down. Tom still trimmed his hedges every Sunday, and Marlene still gardened in silence. But the heaviness around them never lifted. I assumed they'd come to terms with what everyone feared, that Jacob wasn't coming home. Then last week happened. It started with something simple, a shovel. It was Monday around 6:30 p.m. I was dragging our garbage can down the driveway when Tom stepped out onto his porch. "Danny," he said, waving stiffly. "Hey, do you have a shovel I could borrow?" "Yeah, sure. What kind?" "Just something sturdy. Got some work to do in the yard." His hand trembled as he pointed toward the back of his house. I gave him my heavy steelhead shovel without thinking much. He thanked me curtly and walked away. Out of habit, I went upstairs afterward and peeked from our spare bedroom window, the one with the perfect view of Tom's backyard. There he was, digging. Wide strokes, deep hole, no tools, no cement, no project supplies, just digging. After 10 minutes, I grabbed another shovel to help. When I called out, Tom froze. "No!" he snapped, dropping the shovel. "No, it's fine. I've got it. It's just a hole, man." "I said I got it," he barked. His voice wasn't angry, it was scared. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1:34 a.m., I heard it. Clank, thunk, clank. Tom was back outside, digging under the moonlight. A flashlight was duct taped to his shovel handle. The hole was the size of a coffin. When he went inside, I climbed the fence. At the bottom of the hole was a torn edge of a black garbage bag poking from the dirt. My stomach twisted. Before I could touch it, something inside me screamed to run. By morning, the hole was gone. Fresh sod laid down like it had never been there. 2 days later, the police showed up. Someone had called in an anonymous tip. They dug, found nothing. By nightfall, they were gone. That night, my shovel reappeared, leaning against my fence. Clean, polished. A note folded into the handle. One word scrawled in messy ink. Careful. Now every creak in the floorboard sounds like footsteps. Every flicker of light makes me jump. I taped paper over the spare bedroom window. I installed cameras. I keep a crowbar by the bed. I don't know what Tom Grayson buried. I don't know what he moved. I don't know why he warned me, but I know this. Something evil happened next door, and it isn't over. I grew up in Elkwood Hills, a quiet Virginia suburb that looked safe enough on the surface. The kind of place where neighbors waved when you drove by. Kids played basketball in driveways until the streetlights flicked on. And the worst thing you worried about was deer chewing up your garden. But there's something about the woods behind our neighborhood that never felt right. It was thick, unkempt land that stretched for miles, the kind of place parents warned kids to avoid after dark. But kids never listen. That's where Luke Miller and Caleb Hartman spent most of their time. They were both 15, maybe 16, always together, always laughing. They weren't bad kids, just reckless, like most boys that age. One summer, Luke got a pair of BB guns for his birthday. Not the cheap pump-action kind, but sleek, powerful rifles that looked almost real. He and Caleb strutted around with them like soldiers, taking shots at soda cans and old tree stumps behind his backyard. It started innocent enough. But then they graduated from cans to squirrels, squirrels to birds, birds to stray cats. And then, the dogs. I still remember the first time. It was a Sunday afternoon in July, humid and sticky. I was mowing my lawn when I heard it, a sharp yelp, followed by laughter. I cut the engine, sweating, my heart already sinking. Peering through the fence, I saw Luke and Caleb crouched behind a brush line, rifles in hand, aiming at a neighbor's golden retriever. The poor dog was limping, a BB lodged in its side. The boys grinned like they'd just won a prize. I shouted. They scattered. The dog's owner never found out who did it. But I knew. After that, I started watching them. I'd see them lurking near backyards, scanning the neighborhood like predators. They weren't kids playing anymore, they were hunters, and the woods became their hunting ground. The disappearance one evening around dusk, a family on the far side of the subdivision reported their beagle missing. 2 days later, another neighbor's collie vanished. Within a month, 5 pets were gone. The cops chalked it up to coyotes. But I'd seen Luke and Caleb carrying garbage bags into the woods at night. Heavy bags, dripping bags. Once I followed them. I waited until they disappeared into the trees, then slipped after them with a flashlight. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No cicadas, no owls, just silence. After 20 minutes, I saw light flickering ahead. I crouched behind a fallen log. The boys had built some kind of shrine, a circle of stones, scorch marks from small fires, and in the middle, a pile of bones. Not animal bones, too large, too human. My stomach dropped. I wanted to call the police right there, but I couldn't move. My hands were shaking so bad I thought they'd hear my teeth chatter. Then Luke did something that froze me solid. He picked up one of the skulls. Small, child-sized. He cradled it like it was a toy. Caleb laughed, asking if he thought it was the girl. Luke said nothing, just stared at the empty eye sockets. I stumbled backward, snapping a twig. Their heads snapped toward me. "Who's there?" Luke barked. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out, just that I collapsed on my lawn, gasping for breath, covered in mud and leaves. The police visit. The next morning, I called the cops, told them everything. They sent a car out, 2 officers with flashlights. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, trying to hide my fear. An hour later, they came back shaking their heads. "Nothing out there but some old deer bones," one of them said. I tried to protest, but the look in his eyes said it all. He thought I was crazy. When the patrol car left, I noticed something. Luke and Caleb were standing at the edge of the woods, BB rifles slung over their shoulders, grinning at me. The warning that night, I found something pinned to my front door. A Polaroid. It showed me, taken from the woods while I slept in my recliner, TV glowing in the window. On the back, scrawled in red marker, "Stay quiet, or you'll be next." I locked every door, boarded up my back windows, slept with a knife under my pillow. But it didn't matter, because I knew. Those boys weren't just killing animals. They weren't just playing with BB guns, they were practicing. And someday soon they'd turn their sights on people. When you live in a quiet neighborhood, you start to notice the little details. The way a neighbor mows his lawn every Saturday morning. The way another leaves her porch light on all night. The cars that come and go. I first noticed Anne because she didn't do those things. She lived across the street in the White House with green shutters. Tall, thin, pale, like someone who hadn't seen the sun in years. She hardly ever came outside, and when she did, it was like she was in a hurry, head down, eyes darting left and right. Her husband, Richard, was the opposite. Friendly, too friendly, always waving, always talking too long, always making excuses to come over. He looked normal enough, slacks, polo shirts, perfect lawn. But something about him felt off. The kind of guy who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. At first, I chalked it up to me being paranoid. But then, little things started piling up. The first sign. One evening around 9 p.m. I took out the trash. That's when I heard it, faint, desperate knocking. Not from a door, but from inside Anne's house. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I froze at the curb, listening. No lights on, no TV sounds, just the hollow echo of someone trying to get out. I told myself it was pipes. Houses creak, right? But when I looked up, I saw Anne's face in the upstairs window, pale, wide-eyed. She opened her mouth like she wanted to scream. Then the curtain snapped shut. Richard's visit. The next morning, Richard came over with a forced grin. "Morning, neighbor. Say, you didn't happen to hear anything strange last night, did you? Banging pipes, maybe?" His tone was light, but his eyes bore into me, testing me. I forced a smile. "Pipes, yeah. Old houses, right?" He studied me a second longer, then patted my shoulder a little too hard. "Exactly. Old houses." When he walked away, I realized my shirt was damp with sweat. The window for weeks I watched Anne's house. Whenever Richard left for work, she'd sometimes peek through the blinds. Once when I waved, she actually waved back, tiny, hesitant like a child sneaking candy. But as soon as his car pulled back into the driveway, the blinds snapped shut. One night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I looked out my window, and there she was again. Anne, standing in her upstairs room. Except this time, she was holding something against the glass, a piece of paper. I squinted. The letters were shaky, scrawled in red marker. H-E-L-P. Before I could even grab my phone, the light went out. The scream. 2 nights later, I woke up to a sound that turned my blood to ice. A woman's scream, muffled but sharp. It came from Anne's house. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. But before I could dial, Richard's porch light flicked on. He stepped outside in his robe, holding a trash bag. Calm. Too calm. He dragged the bag across the driveway, shoved it into the trunk of his car, and drove off. The scream had stopped. The knock on my door. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. My stomach flipped when I opened it. Richard stood there, smiling, holding a basket of muffins. "Anne baked too much," he said. His eyes locked on mine. "She insisted you should have some." I stared at the muffins. They smelled like blueberries, but I couldn't bring myself to touch them. Then I noticed it. His hands, his nails. They weren't just dirty, they were stained, reddish-brown. Blood. The decision. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing, looking out the window at the house across the street. The curtains never moved. No light came on. Finally, at 3 a.m., I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained everything. Anne's note, the scream, the bag in the trunk. The operator paused, then said, "Sir, you said Anne? Anne Grayson?" "Yes," I whispered. "She's been missing for 3 months." My hand went numb. I dropped the phone. I looked out the window. Richard's porch light clicked on. His silhouette stood in the doorway, facing my house, watching. When you live in a suburb long enough, you think you know everyone. You recognize the mailman's routine, the kids who ride bikes after school, even the joggers who pass by each morning. But sometimes a house doesn't fit the pattern. For me, that house was number 23. It sat 3 doors down from mine, paint peeling, blinds always drawn, lawn overgrown. The man who lived there was named Mr. Howard, but most neighbors just called him that old guy. He kept to himself, rarely came outside, and when he did, he moved like he didn't want anyone to see him. At first, I thought nothing of it. Every neighborhood has one recluse. But then, strange things started happening. The first night. It was a Wednesday around 2:15 a.m. I woke up to a sound, a high-pitched wail that pierced the silence. At first I thought it was a cat, but then came the pounding. Bang! 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 It echoed through the street, followed by a voice, low, garbled, like someone begging. I peeked through my blinds. Number 23's upstairs window glowed faintly. A figure was pressed against the glass. Thin hands clawed at the pane, leaving streaks. Then, suddenly, it was yanked backward into the dark. The light shut off. My chest tightened. I stood frozen for minutes, ears straining. But the street was silent again. The denial. The next morning I walked past number 23 on my way to work. Mr. Howard was outside watering his weeds with a rusty can. He looked up at me. "Morning," I forced. His eyes lingered too long. "Did you sleep well?" The question was simple, but the way he said it felt wrong. Like he already knew I hadn't. That night I couldn't get the sound out of my head. The scream, the banging, the way that shadowy figure had been dragged back into the dark. The second night. 2 nights later it happened again, this time louder, pounding so fierce my walls seemed to rattle. I opened my window just a crack and heard it clearly. "Please, no, stop!" Then silence. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. When the officers arrived, they banged on Mr. Howard's door. He opened it slowly, wearing an old robe, blinking like he'd just woken up. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked calmly. I stood on my porch, heart racing, praying they'd push past him. But after a few minutes of polite conversation, the officers left. One of them even waved at me, saying, "Just an old man." Probably TV too loud, I wanted to scream. The visit. The next day, a note appeared in my mailbox, no stamp, just folded paper with one sentence. "Stop watching me." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. That night, I noticed something chilling. The blinds in Mr. Howard's house weren't fully closed anymore. There was a narrow gap just wide enough for me to see a pale eye staring out. At me. All night. The discovery. A week later, the sound stopped. No banging, no screams, nothing. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then one humid August evening, a terrible stench drifted down the street. Sweet, rancid, heavy. Neighbors whispered about dead raccoons, about sewer leaks. But deep down, I knew. The smell was strongest near number 23. I tried to ignore it. God, I tried. But curiosity clawed at me. One night, when Mr. Howard's lights finally went dark, I crept toward the side of his house. The basement window was cracked open. I crouched down, heart thundering, and peered inside. At first, I saw nothing, just cement walls and shadow. Then my eyes adjusted. There were plastic sheets taped along the floor, a stained mattress shoved against the wall, and beside it, God help me, chains bolted into the concrete. But it was the far corner that made bile rise in my throat. A row of black garbage bags, dozens of them, stacked neatly, too neatly. Something inside one of them shifted. I stumbled backward, tripping into the grass. And that's when I heard it. His voice drifting from the darkness. "You shouldn't have seen the last thing I remember. I ran home, locked every door, and called the police again. This time I begged them to search the house. They promised they'd look into it." That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I've noticed something. Every time I glance at number 23, the blinds twitch. At night, I hear footsteps on my porch. My doorknob rattles once, twice, then goes still. I know it's only a matter of time before he comes in, because the police won't save me, and Mr. Howard knows I saw the bags. I'd lived in my house on Willow Street for almost 3 years before I really noticed the neighbor next door. His name was Mr. Carter, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a stiff posture. He wasn't unfriendly exactly. He'd nod if you waved, but he never lingered, never chatted. He was just there. His house was strange too. Curtains always drawn, no lights in the windows. The kind of house you assumed was empty until you noticed the car shifting spots in the driveway. For the longest time, I didn't care. But then came the noises. The first noise. It was a Friday around midnight. I'd just gone to bed when I heard it. Dull, rhythmic thumping, like someone pounding from underground. At first I thought it was pipes, but the sound came again. Louder. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I leaned out my window, staring at Carter's dark house. The knocks seemed to come from beneath it. The locked basement. A few days later, Carter waved me over as I was raking leaves. "You ever have trouble with your basement flooding?" he asked. His voice was flat, too casual. "Not really," I said. He forced a smile. "Lucky you." I glanced past him. His basement door, an old wooden bulkhead in the backyard, was secured with 2 heavy padlocks and a steel chain. Overkill, especially for a man worried about flooding. When I looked back at him, he was already watching me. His eyes didn't match the smile. The screams. That's when it escalated. One night around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sound I'll never forget. A woman screaming, muffled, desperate, raw. It cut through the still night, coming from Carter's direction. I grabbed my phone, pacing. Do I call the cops? What if I'm wrong? What if it is the pipes? The screaming stopped before I decided. The next morning, Carter was outside, trimming his hedges like nothing had happened. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Rough night?" I dropped my rake. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Heard you pacing." Thin walls, huh? But there was no way he could have heard me. Unless he'd been standing outside my house. The smell weeks passed. No more screams, no knocks. I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Then came the smell. It started faint, like raw meat left out too long. But it grew, seeping into the street. Neighbors complained about dead animals, sewer issues. But the smell was always strongest by Carter's basement door. I saw him one night dragging a black trash bag across his yard. The bag sagged in the middle, dripping. He froze when he noticed me watching from my porch. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, raised his hand in a slow wave, and disappeared behind his house. The police. Finally, I called the cops. I told them everything, the screams, the smell, the basement. 2 officers came out. I watched from my window as they spoke to Carter. He laughed with them, smiled, even offered them coffee. When they asked about the basement, he jingled the locks and said, "Flooding problem. Don't want kids getting in." The officers didn't push. They left after 10 minutes, patting him on the back like he was just another lonely old man. But when Carter glanced up at my window, his smile dropped. The last night. 2 nights later, I woke to a new sound. Not screaming this time, not knocking, whispering. It came from directly beneath my bedroom floor. Faint, but clear. A woman's voice, hoarse and broken. "Help me!" I shot upright, blood pounding in my ears. Then from the same spot, a man's voice answered. Calm, cold, familiar. Too late. He already knows. I bolted to the window. Carter's house was completely dark, but his basement door was open and something inside was moving. I never thought much about neighbors. You wave, you smile, maybe you exchange small talk about the weather or garbage pickup schedules, but you don't really know them. At least I never did, until I moved into the little duplex on Maple Drive. It wasn't a bad neighborhood, just quiet. A strip of modest homes, well-kept lawns, and the kind of silence you either appreciate or get creeped out by, depending on the night. I'd been there 3 months before I realized the man next door was watching me. The first glimpse. It was subtle at first. I was unpacking late one night, sorting boxes in the living room, when I felt it. That strange heaviness on the back of your neck, like someone's eyes are locked on you. I turned. Across the narrow driveway that separated our duplex units, I saw a sliver of light through my neighbor's window blinds. Behind them, a silhouette, perfectly still, facing me. I froze, cardboard box in hand. Maybe he was just passing by. But he didn't move, not even when I turned out the lamp, pretending to ignore him. I went to bed unsettled, telling myself it was paranoia, introducing Mr. Green. The next morning, I decided to be neighborly. I knocked on his door. After a long pause, the lock clicked. The door opened just a crack. He was older than I expected, maybe late 40s, with thinning hair and pale skin that looked almost translucent in the morning light. His eyes, though gray and sharp, studied me like a bug under glass. "Hi, I'm Daniel," I said, forcing a smile. "I just moved in next door." He didn't answer right away, just stared. Finally, he said, "Green." His voice was flat, like it hadn't been used in weeks. "Well, nice to meet you, Mr. Green," I said. He nodded once and closed the door. No handshake, no smile, just closed it. Strange patterns. I tried to brush it off. Not everyone's social. Maybe he was lonely, maybe depressed. But I started noticing patterns. Every night around 11 p.m., the light in his window came on. Always the same lamp casting that same golden glow through the blinds. And always, behind it, his shadow. Sometimes he stood for hours not moving. Other times I'd see his blinds twitch like fingers pulling them back just enough to peek at me. Once I tested it. I stared directly at his window for a full minute. His shadow shifted subtly, like he'd leaned closer to watch. That was the first night I shut my curtains tight. The noises. The walls in a duplex are thin. You hear things. Plumbing, footsteps, the occasional cough. But the sounds coming from Green's side weren't normal. There was pacing, sometimes for hours. Slow, deliberate steps back and forth. Then, without warning, silence. Other nights I heard tapping, like fingernails on the wall, always around midnight. A faint, irregular rhythm, as if he knew exactly where my bed was and wanted me to hear. Once at 2 a.m. I heard a muffled voice, a whisper impossible to make out, but it carried a tone, desperate. Then Green's voice, low and harsh, snapping something that made the whisper cut off. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Was there someone else in that apartment? The trash bags. One morning, taking out my garbage, I noticed Green dragging a large black trash bag to the curb. It was heavy. He struggled, grunting, his pale arms trembling under the strain. As he turned, the bag slipped. Something thudded inside it. A wet thud like raw meat dropping on concrete. Our eyes met. For the first time he smiled, not the polite kind of smile. It was thin, stretched too far, teeth yellow in the daylight. He held my gaze until I carried my own bag to the bin. Then, without a word, he dragged his bag back inside. The garbage truck came and went. His bag never reappeared. The invitation. 2 weeks later, Green surprised me. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., when there was a knock at my door. I hesitated before opening it. He stood there, pale as ever, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. "Thought I'd welcome you properly," he said. His tone was forced, unnatural, like he was imitating friendliness. I didn't want to let him in, but refusing felt dangerous somehow. So I stepped aside. His apartment was dim, lit by a single lamp. The air smelled metallic, sharp like rust and bleach. We sat. He barely touched his drink, just asked me questions, too many. "Do you live alone? Do you keep your curtains shut at night? Do you ever hear things in the walls?" I laughed nervously, pretending it was all small talk. But his eyes never left mine, cold, calculating. When I excused myself and left, I noticed his door had 3 separate locks on the inside. The basement. There was no basement door on my side of the duplex, but one night, circling around his side to take out trash, I noticed it. An old wooden hatch at the foundation, secured with a rusty padlock. As I passed, a sound rose from beneath it. A voice, hoarse, pleading. "Please, help." I staggered back, nearly dropping my bag. The voice was faint, but it was there. Then came footsteps above me. Green moving quickly toward the back door. I ran inside, slammed my own door shut, and locked it. The police. I called the cops. I had to. 2 officers came the next morning. They knocked on Green's door, spoke with him briefly, then left. One shrugged at me on their way out, as if to say, "Harmless old man." But that night there was no shadow in Green's window, no pacing, no tapping. Instead, at 3 a.m., Someone knocked on my bedroom wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, right where my head rested against the pillow. I didn't sleep at all. The recording, I bought a cheap digital recorder and pressed it against the shared wall one night before bed. I left it running for hours, heart hammering as I tried to sleep. The next morning I played it back. At first, just silence, then faint footsteps, pacing. Then around 2:17 a.m., a voice, a woman's voice, clear this time. "Please, let me out." And then Green's voice right against the wall, almost whispering into the recorder. "He hears you. Stop talking." I dropped the device, hands shaking. He knew. The confrontation. I avoided Green for days, curtains shut, doors locked, lights on at night. But eventually I had to leave for groceries. When I returned, there was a note slipped under my door. Just 3 words written in neat block letters. "Stop listening." Now that night I slept with a knife by the bed. The final night. The noises came again, louder this time. Not whispers, screams. A woman crying, fists pounding against the wall. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 when I heard something else. From my window across the driveway, Green stood at his own window. The blinds were pulled all the way up for the first time, and he was smiling. Not at me, at something behind me. I spun, heart lurching. My bedroom closet door was open, just a crack. I hadn't left it that way. From inside, the faintest sound. Breathing. Aftermath. The police came again the next morning. They found my front door open, lights still on, but the place empty. My neighbors said they'd heard nothing unusual. Green told them I'd left in the middle of the night, said I'd told him I was moving. They searched his basement, found nothing but old tools and boxes, no woman, no trace. The case was closed. But sometimes, late at night, neighbors still whisper about Maple Drive, about the pale man who watches from his window, and about the faint screams that echo through the walls of the empty duplex next door. When I first moved into the cul-de-sac on Harrison Lane, everyone told me the same thing. "You'll love it here. Quiet street, good neighbors." They were right, mostly. The couple across from me baked cookies for the whole block. Kids rode bikes in the summer evenings. It was the sort of suburban calm I'd been craving, except for the man at the end of the street. The man no one spoke to, his name was Mr. Ellis. At least that's what I heard. No one knew much about him. He lived alone in a small, sagging house with a rusted chain-link fence. The blinds were always drawn. When I asked a neighbor about him, she lowered her voice like she didn't want him to hear. Best to leave Ellis be. He doesn't like company, but I couldn't help noticing things, like how his lights flickered on at odd hours, or how the alley behind his house always smelled faintly metallic like blood and bleach. Once, taking a late walk, I saw him standing on his porch, perfectly still, just watching me pass by. He didn't nod, didn't wave, just watched. The missing pets. It started with cats. Flyers went up, missing tabbies, calicos, even a dog. At first we thought coyotes, but then someone swore they saw Ellis luring a cat into his yard with scraps of meat. I didn't believe it, until one night I heard it myself. A yowl. Sharp, panicked, then cut off. I looked out my window toward Ellis's dark yard. A shadow moved quickly across it, dragging something behind. The next day, another missing pet flyer went up. The invitation. I never spoke to Ellis until the night he knocked on my door. It was past 11, the street empty and still. He stood there in a wrinkled coat, his eyes small and too bright. "You knew?" he asked, though I'd been there for months. Yeah. Daniel." He nodded. His lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Come by sometime." Neighbors ought to know each other. Before I could answer, he pressed something into my hand. A business card. Blank, except for an address. His, and a time. 2 a.m. Then he walked away. The sounds at night. I didn't go, of course, but at exactly 2 a.m. I woke up to noises, low voices, coming from Ellis's house. One pleading, weak, the other sharp, commanding. Then came a scraping sound like heavy furniture being dragged. Then silence. I lay awake until dawn, staring at my ceiling, heart thudding. The basement window curiosity got the better of me. A week later, I cut through the alley behind Ellis's house. That's when I saw it. A basement window half hidden by weeds. I crouched. The glass was grimy, but I could see faint movement inside. Someone was down there. Not Ellis, someone else. I heard chains rattle, then a muffled sob. My stomach dropped. I backed away, nearly tripping over a trash bin. The police won't listen. I called the police, told them everything, the noises, the basement window, the sobs. They knocked on his door. He let them in. They came out 15 minutes later, smiling politely, telling me there was nothing unusual. Ellis watched me from his porch as they left. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned. The last night. A storm hit the night it happened. Rain hammered the street, thunder shook the windows. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m. there was a knock at my back door. Not the front, the back. I froze. Who uses the back door of a locked house at 3 a.m.? Another knock. Slow, deliberate. I crept into the kitchen, knife in hand. The rain blurred the glass, but I saw a shape standing just beyond it. Tall, thin, motionless. Ellis. He lifted a hand and pressed something against the glass. A collar, leather, with a small silver tag. I squinted and my stomach dropped. It was the missing dog from the flyer. Then he smiled. Aftermath. I don't remember what happened after that. The neighbors say they saw me leave town suddenly in the middle of the night. They say Ellis told them I'd decided the neighborhood wasn't right for me. But every now and then people on Harrison Lane claim they hear noises drifting from Ellis's basement. Sobs, chains rattling. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, a voice calling my name. I moved into the apartment building on Riverside Avenue because it was cheap. Too cheap, honestly. The kind of place where the elevator rattles, the walls are thin, and the hallways smell faintly of mildew no matter how often they're cleaned. But I was broke, and the lease was short, so I told myself I could live with it. That was before I met the man in 4B. The first encounter. The first time I saw him was on move-in day. I was lugging a box up the stairwell when he appeared at the landing above me. Tall, gaunt, wearing a faded gray hoodie despite the summer heat. His eyes were deep-set, shadowed, but he smiled. "You're new," he said. "Yeah, just moving in." He watched me for a beat too long before nodding. "I'm in 4B, if you need anything." Something about the way he said it didn't sound like an offer. It sounded like a warning. Odd hours. The man in 4B kept strange hours. Sometimes I'd hear him pacing at 3 a.m., slow, deliberate steps that went back and forth across his unit. Other times I'd hear whispering. Not on the phone, at least I don't think so. The voice was too low, too close to the wall. Once, while taking out the trash at midnight, I passed his door. The peephole glowed faintly. He was standing there, watching the hallway through it. I felt it. The smell. After a few weeks, the smell started. It drifted through the vents, sharp, metallic, like rotting meat mixed with cleaning chemicals. It would come late at night, linger for hours, then vanish by morning. I complained to the landlord. He shrugged. "Old pipes." Don't worry about it, but I knew it was coming from 4B. The elevator ride one evening, I caught the elevator with him. Just the two of us. The small box of metal felt claustrophobic. He pressed the button for the basement laundry room. I pressed 5. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you ever hear the knocking?" I turned. "What knocking?" He smiled thinly, eyes fixed on the elevator doors. "You'll hear it soon." The doors opened, and he stepped out without looking back. The knocking that night, around 2:30 a.m., it started. 3 knocks, slow, hollow. Coming from the wall behind my bed, the wall I shared with 4B. I froze. Then, after a pause, 3 more. I pressed my ear against the plaster. From the other side came a sound that made my stomach drop. A woman's voice, faint, pleading. "Please, let me out." Then silence. The locked door. The next day I tried to act normal. I passed 4B on my way down the hall. The door was locked, blinds drawn, but taped to the doorframe was a note, handwritten, shaky letters. "Don't believe her." I stood there, staring, heart pounding, until footsteps echoed behind me. When I turned, no one was there. When I looked back, the note was gone. I went to the landlord again, this time more insistent. "There's someone in 4B, I said. "I heard her. She needs help." The landlord's face tightened. He shook his head. "There's no one in that unit but Mr. Hale. He's lived here 15 years, keeps to himself. But I heard—" "Drop it," the landlord snapped. Then softer. "For your own good. Just drop it." The basement, I couldn't drop it. That night I followed Hale. I waited until 1 a.m., then crept down the stairwell. He was in the basement laundry room, but he wasn't doing laundry. Through the cracked door I saw him dragging a black trash bag across the floor. The bag was large, heavy. Something inside it shifted. He unlocked a small storage unit at the far end of the basement. I caught a glimpse inside. Chains, hooks, dark stains on the concrete. Then the door creaked under my hand. He froze. His head turned. I bolted up the stairs before his eyes could find me. The final night. The knocking came again. Louder, more frantic. I couldn't take it anymore. I pressed my ear to the wall, whispering, "I hear you." "I'll help silence." Then suddenly the voice, "No, he's behind you." I spun. My window, which I had locked, was open. And in the reflection of the glass I saw him. Hale, standing in my dark kitchen, watching. Aftermath. The next morning, apartment 5A was empty. My belongings still inside, but no sign of me. The landlord told neighbors I'd broken my lease and left suddenly. Mr. Hale still lives in 4B, and sometimes in the dead of night tenants whisper they hear knocking in the